When the Spanish first came into the area and encountered the Indian people, and they traveled through the country and seen them living in villages along the coast, they could see with their own eyes how the people were living. They were out on the boats, their plank canoes bringing in fish, how they stored the fish, how they survived. But they didn't want to give them the credit. So they did. In other words, if I'm going to be the conqueror, I'm not going to make it look like that these guys are smarter than me. In 1769, the first Portola expedition came through California with the intention with the Catholic Church, looked for locations to build these missions along California, Alta California. So they started out in San Diego, came all up through the coast, reached Santa Barbara and Santa Ines, Lompoc, San Luis Obispo. Those were missions that were built within this area in the Central Coast. They came to this part of the world with a master plan, and that was to convert what they called pagans and the heathens to Christianity, and to use these native people as workforce to build these missions or whatever work they had, farming. When the mission was built in 1804 in Santa Ines, from 1804 till 1824, you got 20 years of influence and treatment by the Spanish soldiers in mission.
And the one thing that the Catholic Church still does not say is that they say that most California Indians died of the missions from disease. But we know through their journals and their words that all the Indians at all the missions worked 11, 12, 13-hour days and got very small portions of food and very poor quality of food. They never received any medical attention. We died from disease because our immune system was so weak that we were overworked and underfed. That's why we died.
In 1821, the Mexican government got the freedom from Spain and took over the governing body of California. And so in the early years of the Mexican control, it was agreed upon that the Indian people would get their freedom and be able to own land, and if they chose, they could become Christians, or they didn't have to, they could continue with their own spiritual beliefs. But after a few years of control by Mexico, the treatment and the influence didn't change from what the Spanish started. So this is what influenced the rebellion in 1824, because the Indian people felt they were betrayed by the government, and they were not given their freedom-free opportunities. February of 1824, some of the Indian people in Santa Barbara, Santa Ines, and Lompoc Mission, they were already Christianized, but they formed an organization to rebel against the church.
The revolt of 1824 is something that, as someone that has Chumash ancestry, one, it was just something that I was very proud of. Like, yeah, my people finally said, okay, enough is enough. We're going to stand up and we're going to, we're going to fight the soldiers, even though they had far superior weapons. And I was very proud of that.
And it took strategy. It took planning. And the rebellion just didn't happen overnight. It took months and months of planning.
But that young boy that was beaten so severely that he almost died, it was literally the straw that broke the camel's back, because all of them had been beaten. All of them had been underfed. All of them had been worked to death.
There was a young boy that had come from Lompoc Mission, Purisima, to Santa Ines to visit a relative of his who was imprisoned in the stockade. That whipping of that boy was probably what triggered off the rebellion. First, they burned down the mission in Santa Ines, and from there they moved over to Lampo and joined the Lampo, La Purisima Indians, and some of the Santa Barbara Indians went with them.
My family was brought into the San Fernando Mission starting in 1803. And during the 1824 revolt, I just found out about a year or so ago that a group of men from the San Fernando Mission snuck out and traveled by foot to Santa Barbara and fought in the 1824 revolt. The San Fernando Mission is 80 miles from the Santa Barbara Mission. They didn't ask the priest for permission. They were going to go fight the soldiers, so they had to sneak out at night, travel by foot to fight soldiers that had rifles and bayonets, and all they had was bows and arrows that were used for hunting. You're not going to do that if it's just because the food isn't served hot enough. You're only going to do that if they're treating you very poorly.
The Indians dug in and they set up a fortress and was ready for battle. 1,200 Indian people that had gathered. The Mexican army didn't react immediately. It wasn't until March, almost a month later, that they came and attacked the Indians in Lampo. So there was a battle that went on, and it lasted for several days. And finally, they overpowered the Indian people. It's just unfortunate when some of the greatest armies in the world were defeated by gunpowder or power that the other one had over them. So there were several months of this constant skirmishes or chasing after Indians and bringing them back by the army of Mexico. They would go into the hills, influence them to come back to the mission. Some of the Indian people stayed over in the Central Valley, never came back. And a lot of the Indian people that lived on the missions were not willingly, they were definitely not willing to convert, but they only did it to fool the church, to make them think that so they wouldn't be abused any further, or their families were not hurt. A lot of the Indians came back and they were converted to Christianity, and they became influenced by the Mexican population. Throughout the 1800s, they were now lost their own culture, lost their own language, lost their own traditions.
The 1824 revolt is so important to say, here's a tribe of people that are not warlike. They were forced to. They had no choice. We have to stand up and say, no, we're not going to take this anymore. When you look at the big picture, that was a bold thing. I'm sure there's many Chumash people today that kind of have that I want to stand up for what's right attitude, and we got that from our ancestors that were involved in the 1824 revolt. Our ancestors that were able to survive two of the most horrific times in Chumash history, the missions and then the genocide when California became a state.